Insider, where passion meets opportunity.
Welcome to the Youth Sports Insider. I am your host, Bill Flitter. Today we have a special guest, Mark Botterill. He's from Augusta Brands. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, pleasure to be with you.
So Mark, for our audience, can you give us a bit of background on who you are? You and I had a chance to chat. You got extensive experience in youth sports and sports in general, and we'd love to hear where all that started. And you guys will probably recognize a little bit of a British and Wisconsin accent in that mix from Mark. So,
Yeah, no, that's a good mixture, right?
yeah,
Wisconsin and
that's
English
right.
accent, but yeah. No, I enjoyed our chat pre-call. Yeah, an Englishman in Wisconsin is kind of an interesting thing, but yeah, back in 1981, that's what happened, and I think probably the most fun I've ever had in my life was those early days in starting something from scratch. Basically, nobody could spell soccer in La Crosse, Wisconsin, back in 1981. Uh, but my life was enriched by teaching in short pants, which is what Bob Gansler, the past U.S. men's national team coach who I got to work with in later in life, used to call it. So I was teaching in short pants, but we couldn't find a soccer ball in the city of La Crosse when we moved there, and soccer was a passion of mine at that point. And so today it stands as one of the largest youth sports programs in the country, if not in the Midwest, through the Coulee region. So super proud of what we sort of built back in 1981. But that was a starting point for sure. And then that passion for soccer sort of evolved itself through coaching college soccer, working with the Minnesota Strikers, then running probably one of the greatest clubs of all time, at least in the youth system, was the Milwaukee Kickers. We ended up building an amazing facility in Elan Soccer Park for all those people that play there every day. And then bought and owned the first time a youth sports team really owned a professional franchise called the Milwaukee Rampage. So I had a tremendous amount of fun doing that. Ended up coaching girls high school for giggles. I have two girls in my house, two daughters. So that was a totally unique experience back in Whitefish Bay. Won a few state championships, so it was a ton of fun, but great journey to be part of those girls' lives. And then got back into enterprise. My wife told me I was spending way too much more time with other people's children than my own, and so I ended up entering into the world
The
of
life of a
sports
coach.
enterprise. Yeah, it's a great life if you can get away with it, but sometimes you can't get away with it. So today, I find myself as the vice president of strategy for Augusta Sportswear, now called Momentic, but let's just call it Augusta. It's a little easier. It's the largest manufacturer in North America today. Two companies coming together under an equity ownership, and just really enjoying, really diversifying my knowledge around lots of different sports. Still passionate for soccer, but as I said earlier, I know enough to be dangerous over the course of my time through youth sports development. So.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, you have quite the background. So yeah, let's dive in. We're going to talk about today this idea of funding youth sports, the ROI around youth sports for brands to get involved. And I'd love to just start with a very just open-ended question of
Sure.
is are brands coming to youth sport, is that good for the sport?
I think from a corporate investment position today, youth sports is as vital as anything that is an ingredient in a young child's life. I mean, it's literally sports today. Physical activity is as important holistically, mentally, and physically as any ingredient in a young child's life, be it food, be it vegetables, be it water. I mean, it's as important a product to a young child today as anything. It's kind of interesting. The second most important person in a young child's life is their coach, right after their
Yeah.
parent. And so it shows you the extraordinary importance of that journey the child goes through, socialization, physical activity, the experiences that they go through. And so to invest in that story is from what we see is a tremendous opportunity for corporations to get involved in underwriting what has become an expensive pastime. And the advancement of equity sports can be seen as a very positive thing, but it's also could see as a costly thing. And so some children might lose out on that process. So underwriting and writing, the capabilities of children to be able to access sports 12 months a year is super important. There's a tremendous amount of return on investment from a loyalty perspective. Parents are very, very loyal to anything that advantages a child. But it's also a tremendous amount of health and wellness about being part of a young sportsman's life and being able to give them the opportunity to play. So we're constantly seeing, at least from our corporate lens, people wanting to come into the marketplace and put good bets down on tremendous opportunities for young children.
We talk often about the sideline hours, and that's kind of how we're looking at measuring the investment in youth sports, right? Because at the end of the day, a brand is after attention and attention from
Mhm.
right the parents in the stands, right? The ones with the pocketbook, right? And that's generally speaking. I know there's, of course, some brands and local, your local restaurant, your local insurance agent, right? They may want to do so the kids in the program, or they're doing it as a, charitable thing. But let's put the focus on, brand is looking for an ROI, right? So, if you think about a parent goes to watch, let's take basketball since that's near and dear to my heart. They'll go to a tournament on a weekend. They'll spend, they'll watch their son or daughter for at least 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
For six, let's just call it 60 minutes, round numbers here, right? So 60 minutes per game, 3 games, you know, uh, so that is, you think about that and compare that to some other opportunities. Yeah, that's huge, right? From a brand perspective and visibility perspective. I don't know if you have thoughts on
Yeah.
that
I mean, I think
perspective.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a perspective just brand recognition, right? And
Hmm.
brand recognition is important in visibility areas in basketball, courtside, signage, et cetera, et cetera. But I think where you're seeing the innovation around reaching out to parents is in the league management system. So if you look at LMS, league management systems,
Hmm.
Stack Sports, Sports Connect, league apps, Team Snap.
Hmm.
And so you not only have the connectivity to the parent to their registration when they connect to register, you've also
Hmm.
got all the communication systems that TeamSnap has, where TeamSnap's talking about the weather. They're in coming up for practice. They're talking about a brand like Mojo, for example, that gives you coaching lessons
Hmm.
digitally that you can
Right. Yeah.
download when you're getting. And so I think the modern day corporation is also looking to blend a ROI through the digital connectivity to a sports parent. So you look at
Hmm.
Team Snap today. I mean, they sell advertising, obviously, but you're able to reach the parent at a very timely moment. You're reach them with a very meaningful message, and you're able to call into action something that they can deliver. So I think that digital connectivity today, because almost 90% of every child playing youth sports is on one of these league management systems, that gives a longevity to the message. It gives a connectivity at the right time. And so I think you're seeing a lot of brand corporations wanting to be able to access that digital connectivity as well as the on-field kind of signage that sort of brings brand recognition. But the real driver, the call to action is through that digital connectivity through the registration flow.
Yeah, that's interesting perspective. Yeah. So, is there the value though in the uh, let's just call it the event itself, right? The
Yeah.
on-site.
I think there's less advantage today, if I'm being very honest with you, than the year-long capabilities through digital connectivity through their management systems and their
Hmm.
communication systems. Think of you as a basketball coach. If you go onto Team Snap, not to pick on them at all, but or to sort of trumpet them. I mean,
Yeah.
Team Snap's communicating with the team and the parent and the coach and its players, sometimes in the case 3 or 4 times a week, right? So there's that constant messaging capability around Dix.com or Augusta.com or buy this from there, et cetera, et cetera. Visit Gatorade at the Circle K, for example. You see a ton of that cross branding capabilities, and so those are real critical components to big partnerships. Now, when you're talking about a local community that wants to support the event that's there, yeah, there's some value to that. So it's kind of a tiered system as to sponsorships Is there a national or regional brand that wants that connectivity to the average sports participant? And are there a different tier when it comes to localized support around an event? Do you frequent, the restaurants? Do you frequent this, that, and the other? But
Hmm.
generally exposure is only good, somewhere between 7 to 10 times, right? And so it's not a constant message that you see in front of you. It's the diversity of the connections and the multiplication of those connections, and that's what digital brings to you. But
Yeah.
I think it's less important today, basketball arena signage than the digital connectivity, to be honest with
Yeah, and again, not just to pick on basketball, but again, if it's soccer or if it's a
you. Yeah,
baseball
for sure.
field or yeah, yeah. So, if I'm a brand and I'm looking at investing in youth sports, what should I be looking at? How do I
Yeah,
even, yeah, how do I get
I think
started?
it I think you got to be mission aligned with youth sports, right? And
Okay.
there's just so much extraordinary connectivity. I mean, 498 of the Fortune 500 company CEOs played sports up to the
Yeah,
collegiate level. That's
crazy,
an
right?
extraordinary statistic
Yeah.
when you look at that. And so when you look at corporations looking at youth sports, they look at it incredibly favorably from their own personal experience. But I
Hmm.
think to have everybody's that probably is listening has gotten into a sponsorship and been very happy with the money and thank you for the support. Then it's 1 year and then they're out, right? And then they're on to
Right.
something else. And so it's
Yeah.
what's called rainy day money in corporate sponsorships. What you got to do is build programs that have great longevity to them, because you don't want to keep selling something every 5 minutes and enjoying a $10,000 sponsorship 1 year, then nothing the next year. Just there's no sustainability behind that kind of funding. So I think you got to look at long-term sustainable partnerships that are meaningful to both organizations. And generally, there's got to be a mission alignment. So when I think back to the days of the Milwaukee Kickers, where we raised significant monies to offset our program within the Milwaukee public school system, we chose, for example, grocery stores. So if you look at a grocery store today, it's the way you look at it. If you walk in tomorrow, so if you're a youth sports organization listening into the podcast and you go into a grocery store, for example, it's got a big box retail store, you're going to see 150 different companies, right? And
Hmm.
you're going to see Del Monte, Heinz, etc. Go down the list, Gatorade, Coca-Cola. Now, all of those companies have vast amounts of advertising capabilities. The trick behind that kind of sustainable partnerships is the grocery stores got to get connectivity to the members of the organization. They want people to frequent their store, but they don't want to pay for that. They want their vendors to pay for that, right? So they're going to go to Heinz and they're going to go to Dole Fruit. This is going to be granular, Bill, here, but they're going to ask them to pay for the sponsorship of underwriting a youth sports program. But it's super sustainable because the store will give benefits to Heinz or let's say Papa John's Pizza, right, for something. And
Hmm.
Papa John's Pizza are going to move to the front of the grocery store. They're going to move to the front of the freezer. They're going to get the coupons on a Sunday, and then the pizza company will pay $20,000 to underwrite all of the balls for the children to play soccer, or all of the goals to play in soccer, or $10,000 worth of sponsorship for children. And the grocery store will get the big promo. Look at the branding, look at the loyalty within the community organizations. But it'll be those brands who've got promo dollars that will pay. Now, when you're thinking through, well, what are the other Del Montes? Could they do 10,000? Could they do 5,000, etc.? So it's a vendor program, and so the store gets everything out they want. The pizza place gets the front of the grocery store and increases their incremental sales. And the youth sports organizations get sustainable income from a local community that wants to repeat that business. Now, you could extrapolate that to Kohl's department store, which we were fortunate enough to do at
Mm.
Kickers. Kevin
Yeah.
Mansell was the CEO at the time I was there. He had all 5 kids playing in their club, but he underwrote the U.S. women's game that we had there. But he did the same thing. Oshkosh Bagosh and all those other brands paid for these types of things, Levi, and they were all associated with young children's needs and clothing needs. And then they took those promo dollars and Kohl's got the promo and but Levi's paid the price, right? So vendor programs like that, local community things where the community is going to shop and return that ROI that you mentioned, but that's how you can extrapolate the revenue from it. More
Interesting.
to it than that, and we have time, but those are long term sustainable because they're
Yeah.
turnkey and don't have to sell it every day.
So yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. It's as a just take a youth sports organization, right? They don't have the expertise to go in and look for sponsorships on a daily basis. So having something that is long term for them, they sell once and it keeps on running. Let's dive into that a little bit though. So
Yeah,
again, since we both have ties to Wisconsin, we're in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I have a
yeah,
club basketball team. It's got 200 players on my club team. We want to supplement the cost through sponsorships. Okay.
yeah,
So how do I start? Let's pick on the grocery store. Like, okay, so right,
yeah.
what's my
Great
pitch?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I would do, that I would recommend is that number one thing that people don't do right off the bat is they don't build an infrastructure to accept money,
Okay.
right? You have to go into this thinking, well, I'm going to get revenue back. So how do I treat the people that provide me with this resource? Believe it or not, I have been in meetings in which a company has given $100,000 and the organization didn't cash a check for 4 months. And the backdrop was, well, you didn't really need the money, right? Because you took four
Yeah.
months to cash. I was in another meeting with a processed food company that paid a ton of money to partner, and they never got a thank you. They didn't get a
Mm,
book of things that they spent the money on. They got none, and so they withdrew the sponsorship. So it's not a small thing, even if it's $500 or $10,000 or $100,000, to build an infrastructure that can accept that money. Thank yous, a clip art book, even of things that you did to promote that brand, and you provided
really good
that.
point.
Make sure the banking is squared away, your fiduciary responsibilities, and as you get bigger money, right, you have to do a little bit more around your infrastructure to accept the money, but you have to be able to utilize that money appropriately. People are going to want to know, well, who are you in charge of your organization? Can you determine where that money goes? Are you able? So you've got to have a really good infrastructure to take even $500 properly. So I would never underscore that because I've been into some terrible meetings in which people have
Yeah.
pulled their money because of some basic problems. But so starting from there is just organize yourself, right? Make sure that you're
Hmm.
documenting all of the stories about the club and what it's done. Maybe a child that's going to college for the first time on a basketball scholarship. Maybe it's a player that goes out of the country for the first time to represent, an AAU program or whatever, right? But
Hmm. Hmm.
um, cut those stories out around what you're doing in the community, how important you are. As if you supported a blood drive, if you had a little bit of a story about helping building a house back that fell down, or anything that's community based, and build that story about how impactful you are to the community. And that gift to a sponsor is really deeply meaningful because they can see the benefit of sponsoring an organization that has some impact into the community. And be sure that you thank them for the business and thank them for the money and cash your check early because you look
That's
like
right.
you need the money, right? But aside
Yeah.
from that, once you do that, I think there's also people sort of rush into sponsorship. That doesn't mean to say you shouldn't be quick to market, but you should see the value of what you're giving away and find the market value to those things. So if you're going to put your name on everybody's shirt, what is the value of that, right? And do a little bit of science behind, that type of advertising. Don't go undersell something or oversell it for that matter. But do it in the right market tendency. So know what you think the value is, and then understand what you can sell. Right? What are you willing to sell, and what are you willing? Who are you willing to sell it to?
Hmm.
So with new respect to Hooters, for example, but I suspect that's probably something you might not want to sell, right? But if someone came to you and said, "We'll give you $100,000," you need to have an understanding of what you're willing to sell and who you're willing to sell it to, so that you don't compromise your business or your nonprofit mission. And but you can put yourself in some tough spots. I mean, Miller Lite's a fantastic company and wonderful people. Know lots of folks there from Milwaukee for sure, but maybe Miller Lite's not a great youth sports sponsorship. But if they came to you with $200,000, are you prepared to have the right answers behind that, and so on and so forth? So know the value, know what you're willing to sell, and know who you're willing to sell it to. Are good guidelines for your organization when you do that.
No, that's
In
that's
terms
really
of
good
yeah,
advice. I think the just even the simple things like you said, thank you. right?
Yeah.
Following up with
Oh, you
with
wouldn't
a
believe it.
thank you
Yeah.
in a picture of, your sports team, right? It says, thank
Yep.
you to our sponsor, yeah, whatever that is. No.
I think
Um,
a lot of people provide plaques. I don't know that that's meaningful to some degree. I think sometimes it is. I think it's meaningful if you chart the course of your organization over the year. What have you done? Whether it's paper clippings or whether it's notes or whether it's letters from
mhm.
parents, try to bring the heart and soul of your mission to your partners and show the impact. Like I said, I've seen books that have the child that when I coached in Milwaukee in the Milwaukee Kickers, we had a child called Demetrius White, D. White, and we did a story behind the first time he was ever out of the city of Milwaukee was to represent the United States at under 14 level in France. We put him on a plane. No, it was the first time he actually left the city limits of Milwaukee. He was 13
Wow.
years of age. And it was this tremendous story that people really resonated. He was a child that had been cloistered in the inner city of Milwaukee and had this opportunity to blossom his understanding. And today, Demetrius runs a program called the Simba Lions, which is predominantly an African American soccer program. There aren't too many of them that really focus on the culture of African American soccer, but he's now the head of that. But he did that because of the experience that he had by leaving the city and understanding what things are done elsewhere. And he wasn't myopic; he had grown and blossomed his understanding of the business. And so we drove that story around. This is what Coles had helped with and others had helped with
Mm, hmm.
evolve this town. So I can tell you it's deeply meaningful because it strikes to the mission alignment of most companies. And maybe they don't sell, 100,000 extra units of a product, but they did something that was deeply, in fact, impactful to young children and ultimate leaders of the community.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's a great story too. I want to jump back to something you said though, which is understanding the value of what you have. So again, I'm in this pitch meeting, and one of the things I'm going to sell, since it's near and dear to you, is a logo on my jersey.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Uh, what's the value of that? Like, again, just think,
That's a great question.
I'm new to this. I don't know
Yeah.
right? So this is not something, a coach does every day. So how do I justify whatever value there is there with that logo on the
Yeah.
jersey?
It's a great question. At the end of the day, the easiest answer is to look at market precedents, and I can tell you that roughly what we've seen is anywhere between $5 and $10 per jersey is what the value is of a visible year-round sponsorship of a jersey. And I can only do that through looking at what Jimmy John's paid for Utah Youth Soccer, for example. Utah Youth
Mm-hmm,
Soccer
hmm.
sold Jimmy John's on the front of the jersey to 50,000 players in Utah Youth Soccer. Drew Hyatt from
Wow.
Stack Sports ran that program. Circle K is giving up to $10. Uh, Tim Horton Donuts is giving up to. So there are, I could go through what the values are through what the market will tolerate, right?
Yeah,
And so it's somewhere between $5 and $10. Now, are there nuances to that? Absolutely. If you're the
yeah,
national championship and your TikTok and everything else is watching you, clearly that blows that out of the water, and there's a
right.
higher value for that. But generally, people who come to you will know what they're willing to pay for that type of exposure. But on our 95% of everyday uniforms in our community programs, you're looking at predominantly top end $10 for each unit to sell the front of a shirt.
And and again, I know this is gonna vary as well, but if you're selling a national brand versus a local brand, I can hear coaches argue, well, we only have 200 players. You mentioned 50,000
Yeah.
players at a soccer program. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah, that was the Utah Youth Soccer Association. I'm just thinking back through larger sponsorship plays and what they're willing to pay for logo
Yeah, that's uh,
identification.
that's that's I mean 50,000 kids, and then to have a logo on that jersey, that's good reach, but is it yeah, should I even bother I'm probably not going to bother a big brand. I'll never get through to them if I have 200 kids in my program, right? But maybe the local branch of Piggly Wiggly,
right, in my
Yeah,
town. Since we're going to
for sure.
Wisconsin, that's the number one grocery store in Wisconsin. I read that the other day. Uh, is that, can I make a pitch for that, right?
So go back one step, Bill. And if you
Yeah.
really want to make a pitch to something, 90% of people that sponsor youth sports programs have a kid in the program. So going back to that lead
Mm,
management system conversation that we have, it's imperative. And a lot of people are very uncomfortable asking this question is when a child registers, you simply ask the child, what do you do for a living? And what does your mom and dad do for a living? Super
that's a
uncomfortable.
really
Some
good
people ask
point.
that question.
Yeah.
But 90% of all sponsorship comes from within the organization. Did that in the
Mm,
Milwaukee Kickers for sure. We have Kevin Mansell as a good example at Cole's department store. We had all five of his children playing the club, right? That made a ton of
yeah.
sense. You go back to grocery stores, the owner of Pick and Save, who owned 10 branches, had three kids in the program. And
Oh,
we
wow.
went
Yeah.
straight to him, but we knew that he had kids in the program. He was a coach within our club. Our story to him was a warm process. It wasn't cold. We weren't asking him for corporate dollars from the scratch. He knew the mission of the organization. He knew what it did for his children. He knew the value. It was the
Mm-hmm.
easiest conversation we ever had with someone, and he ended up giving us $200,000, I think, at the end of the day. But and he found lots of pockets of money that he could give. Like we put up a billboard inside the organization, and he paid $45,000 a year for something on 71st and Good Hope, and he put it in our building instead. So, but it comes from understanding who's in your organization. And frankly, every time I've ever helped anybody with that, they've literally been stunned at the who's who that's plays in their sports business. Remember,
Yeah.
498 Fortune 500 CEOs, right, played
Yep.
collegiate sports. So you're going to find folks of particular strength in the business community that have children playing in sports because they themselves know the value of their own. And so you'll find people willing to provide you with that kind of money. And so you'll find bank managers, which is an amazing organization to get money from, by the way. You'll find people that run enterprises and businesses. You'll find people that are marketing agencies. It'll be stunning as to what you find when you're willing to ask that question.
Yeah, and again, going back, I think that's a really, really important point. And uh, when a parent then signs up their kid, you're literally just asking that question on the sign up form.
You can do that for sure, or you can give the context as to why you do it, and you can
Yeah.
say, "Hey, listen, we're asking this question because we need funding, right, to be able to run a better program to offer children accessibility to the program. Not everybody can afford to play. We want to expand safety and better facilities, and with that needs funding. And we're asking the question to see if you might be able to point us in the direction of where we can access money. And so people feel very comfortable with your transparent request as to why you're asking for that.
Hmm.
Now you can dispense with it and just ask them. It's opt in or opt out if you want to give us the answers to that question. But
Right. Right.
90% of the people are not uncomfortable sharing what they do and seeing if they can help the organization in some way.
Yeah, and especially if you made an impact, right, already, right, and you're having an
Yeah.
impact on a positive impact on children's lives, right? That question just becomes
Yeah.
that much easier to answer. Uh, so going back to the brand side, all right. So we just talked about the kind of the club side of things and then the brand side. We're going to put this logo on a jersey. You were talking about $5 to $10 approximately based on, your past experience. Um, one of the flaws you had mentioned on is okay, that's great. How, what would if you're a brand, what's the follow-up question to that? Okay, it's going to cost me $5 to $10.
Yeah. One thing we just take a step back. When you're selling
Yeah,
that sponsorship, you want to there's net and gross, right? And so a
right.
lot of people make this mistake. They go for it's $10, right? And then they find out it costs $6 to put the heat transfer across the jersey, and so
Yeah,
now their net is only actually $4. So
right.
the net value is 10. The cost to put it on is 4, and so the sponsorship is $14, right? So that's actually something for people forget
That's
to their
a
chagrin,
good
right?
point. Yes.
Yeah, by the time they get
Yeah.
to printing everything, all of a sudden the money's evaporated. But I think,
Hey,
yeah,
pause
I mean,
there
this
one
is,
second,
yeah,
Mark. So then if I'm doing that very specifically, I'm saying, okay, it's going to cost, let's just $10. So I would say $10 plus printing costs.
Yeah, so it's called net and gross, right? So the net
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
value
Yep.
is the value of the exposure, and you're going to assess that at $10. In order to get your logo printed on the jersey, the gross, and which is the cost, is four. So the gross cost is 14, but the net value is 10. So
Yeah.
now there are lots of, actually, oddly enough, sublimation is a process today in
Yeah.
manufacturing. You don't, that is actually today not an additional cost. Now, if you silk screen heat transfer, getting a bit technical here, but if you have an application, it costs you a bunch of money to apply that. And the beauty of sublimation is you don't have that additional cost. But predominantly, I would ask for a net value of the sponsorship and a gross cost to execute
Okay.
the
All right.
printing and the logoing.
Okay, so then yeah, yeah. So okay, great. That's what the cost is. Uh what's for the again the brand says okay, I understand that. Now what?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where you got to be a great listener, right? And I think
Hmm.
people are eager to talk about what they're doing. You've really got to listen to what they want. Okay, so we're interested in sponsoring Oshkosh basketball,
Yeah.
and then you just tell me your story, right? And let's say you're talking to X company, just understand what their story is and listen. Going back to strategy and tactics, if you have this list of people that work at XYZ company, let's call it Piggly Wiggly, for example. If there are two
Yep.
or three employees at Piggly Wiggly, you bring them with you, right? And let them do the talking because they're easy not to
Hmm.
pitch it. Because they're like, yeah, look, I work for Piggly Wiggly. It's an amazing company. I love. We've been working there for X number of years, and our kids in the Oshkosh basketball program, and look what it's done for our families and our community. And they're your greatest right seller because they just talk from their heart about how important the organization is, and it pulls at the Piggly Wiggly leadership strings. They've got employees doing wonderful things around the community. So always bring somebody that's part of that company because they can tell a great story for you. But if you go back to Piggly Wiggly, it's going to be okay, I'm happy to be mission aligned with the community, and we want to give back to the community. But we'd love to see us do X, Y, Z, and that's where you listen to what their needs are. If you go to
Hmm.
Piggly Wiggly, they're take any big box retailer, you can go for the most part into their nonprofit donation program, and so each member might get a number like 001, for example, and when they go into the store and buy things they just give the
Hmm.
001 code and they'll get a rebate. You'll get a rebate at Oshkosh for every child that family that shops at Piggly Wiggly, and they'll give you money back through their charitable donation arm.
Oh, right.
Um,
Sure. Yeah.
so there's lots of ways to be able to do that, and go back to the league management system. You can build a Piggly Wiggly messaging that gives you use this coupon code right for 10% off, um, sport beverages, right? And they'll be able to chart how many people are responding to that. So that gets into a bit of the science, and then you only want to do that if the money's significant for sure. But um, they're going to want to see how much people will back Piggly Wiggly, right? And there are lots of different ways to be able to support that through your digital programming, the couponing,
Right.
etc. But for the most part, people if it's a localized, regionalized mission alignment partnership, they're going to want to see your best effort to supporting them, but they want to know your story. What did I support? How did I make an impact on the community? If it's a kid going to college for the first time, if it's the first time a player's ever played sports in their family, that's deeply meaningful to a company to spell out to their organization. Most companies have call out calls, right, or standing calls, and they want to do things for the community so that their employees feel really good about the company they work for, right? They're
Yeah.
backing really important initiatives within the community. Most regional and local sponsorships are really about the journey that your program's going through and the impact you have on the community. And then when you get into that science, and the money's more important, you're going to have to build a little bit more of a science process to how much your organization is supporting the partner.
So, I've been doing marketing and advertising on the buy side, sell side, so kind of know both. So if I'm buying, let's move it to digital, and I'm buying an ad on Facebook, okay?
Yeah,
I'm expecting, a certain return from that Facebook ad, right? Every
sure.
dollar I'm spending, I'm expecting to get Y in return. Uh, what I'm hearing you say on the youth sports sponsorship side, it's not quite is the same equation that I can use to, I guess, justify the dollars that I'm giving this youth sports organization.
I think today, uh, yeah, I hesitate to say there isn't a science behind sponsorship, but there isn't too many companies that are giving away money without some level of return. But I think
Hmm.
the story that you build is as important to the business's goodwill as anything today. But I think, the other thing is if you do have the significant money, you do have to go to a sponsor where you can chart the success of your program, right? So I'll give you a AYSO, a soccer organization in California, did a
Hmm.
Hyundai sponsorship. It just has so happened that the owner of Hyundai at the time was an Irishman who had two kids playing soccer and
There you
was
go.
a
Yeah.
passionate guy, right? And then so they approached him because he had two kids playing soccer and AYSO, and they did I can't remember the number. Let's say it's a $500 gift every time
Hmm.
someone did a Hyundai Drive test drive, right? And they did 20,000 of them, some ridiculous number. I can't remember the number,
Holy
but they
cow.
could
Wow.
chart how many people registered for. Said, I'm an AYSO person. I'd like to get the $500 sponsorship, and I'm going to drive your car. But that was
Right.
an easy thing to chart, right? Because
Right.
they
Right.
had to announce themselves. So you can get into programs, Subway or Cousin Sub in Wisconsin, right?
Hmm.
You can get into how many, the sort of the KPI behind how many
Right.
people frequent that. Now, there are some sponsors you don't know how to do that, but so to a certain degree, it's hard to chart the ROI, and so that may be less sustainability in that partnership. But I think you've got to design plans around the type of sponsor that you have, and it depends on the type of sponsorship you get, whether you can build a KPI that shows the level of commitment to that brand and why they should continue to support you.
Yeah, yeah. And are you this is a great example of the dealership. Are and I don't know if this question was or the you were going in this when we were off air talking about some unique programs.
Mhm.
Uh, can you maybe dive into a few that you've seen that are pretty unique, sponsorship type stuff or support for youth organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hear this process. You see the big sponsors that go in wanting to make a significant impact in multiple communities,
Hmm.
and it's kind of interesting. They do tend to go in cycles, right? So, um, tire companies was a huge thing. Again, that was a sponsorship. They could literally conduct the KPI. So if people came in with, "Hey, I am part of Oshkosh basketball. I'm told if I go into American Tire and get my tires, you'll donate $200, and so here's my representation that I play for Oshkosh and basketball and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I want to be able to recognize, my commitment to you. So we've seen a lot of tire companies invest lately for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a massive investment currently. So I just give you what I've seen today, because
Yeah,
Augusta
please. Yeah.
prints a lot of that stuff, right? So certainly children's hospitals are huge.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Physical therapy folks are huge, right? They see a great value, obviously, and a big RRI for sure in those types of partnerships. There are lots of Procter and Gamble companies investing. I looked at we just worked with Circle K in very strategic areas. They're flagging in their business, and so they're looking for support from local communities. So they've got a very community-driven brand.
Yeah.
Tim Hortons, if you're in the
Oh, yeah.
Northeast and the
Hmm.
Upper Midwest, will underwrite uniforms completely as long as Tim Hortons across the front of the jersey. And you get free donuts, I guess, if you walk in with your soccer uniform. So you see a lot of food. Subway sponsored the NFL flag program recently, and so you're seeing a lot of fast food restaurants, for good or for bad, right? Obviously, hoping they're representing good food and good nutrition for children. But and so we see a huge investment from those guys at the moment for sure. Um, so yeah, I think it goes a little bit in cycles. I mentioned Jimmy John's in Utah, for example, but Jimmy John's has a bit of a nationwide program support for youth sports as well.
Excuse me.
Um, and then for sure, those folks in the restaurant, in the grocery business, and the big box retail business, you're seeing a lot of support from big box supporters once you understand the vendor program. So, in terms of unique program, I think the AYSO test drive Hyundai program was
Yeah.
big. That I saw a
Mhm.
tremendous amount of success with that. Lando Frost is a big sponsor, and they saw great value in uniform recognition. In fact, back they were about $7 to $9 that they were paying for that. But again,
Mm.
it's just kind of
Hmm.
a mission alignment. I've got a list of sponsors today that we see. One of the big ones just recently has been Xbox. I'm not sure
Oh
that's
yeah.
my favorite sponsorship, but you've got to
Yeah.
get in line with kind of the trends of where they're going. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
there isn't a sort of a clearinghouse of an agency that says to the youth sports market, hey, these companies today are out canvassing youth sports opportunities. Test your local folks for those things. Maybe this is something you could pick up on, Bill, down the road. But we definitely have seen those types of companies that I just listed put significant dollars into youth sports partnerships for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. I'd like to dive into the something you came back or you said again, and and maybe we can actually maybe we'll tease it here, and if you're open and willing, come
Yeah,
back
sure.
on another episode to dive maybe deeper into, because I think it's really important, is the vendor program. So again,
Yeah,
this was in the context of, you're at your Piggly Wiggly, and it's not Piggly Wiggly writing the check, it's Heinz Ketchup writing the check through Piggly Wiggly. Uh,
correct.
right? Is that the concept that I just want to make sure that that idea is clear.
Yeah, I mean, it's what the pro franchises do, right? So if you go to a
Yeah.
Green Bay Packer game, you just go look at some of the advertising balls. You're going to see a bunch of food, but that's all driven by back then it was Scogan's IGA and so on and so forth. But that program is relatively a sophisticated program, but it's not when you look at it from a youth community perspective because almost all of those families shop what $300-400 a week in grocery stores. It's big business, so
Yeah.
big box capabilities are you know are super impactful. Their community support is super impactful, super meaningful, and you can gauge how much support you're getting through a number of different programs. We mentioned one before, like the charitable digit number that you can provide, but the key is being able to, if I were going to go through the stepping stones of how we work with Pick and Save, it was identifying Scott Siller, then the owner of Pick and Save, who was part of our membership. And so I'm not going to say Scott back then was an easy target, but he was a coach of a program. He had 3 kids in the program. His wife was a manager. He was all in on the membership, right? So
Yeah.
that
He
was an
definitely was
easy
a
guy to
hot
go
lead
talk
right
to.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you're going to find that everybody's going to find that, and then of course we had like 50 people in the organization that worked at Pick and Save, and so
Mm,
that was an
mm.
easy. We dragged some people along to Scott's house and we sat and talked to him, and away we went. Um, but Scott, the way Scott sort of helped us coach us through it was, I'm not going to spend any money with you. I'm going to spend my vendors' money. What I am going to give you is I'm going to give you these assets that these vendors that want, right? Um,
Hmm.
and so if you're a salesperson, and you want to make the bonus for July, you clearly want your pizza to go to the front of the freezer. And if you spend $10,000 to underwrite a children's, scholarship
Mm.
initiative, it's nothing compared to the type of revenue a grocery store would earn through moving the pizza joint closer to the end of the end cap, if you
Yeah.
want to call it that. And the salesperson basically gets his bonus, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody in that chain wins. And so when everybody wins, it's a sustainable product program. You're not trying to sell it every year. It's something you can rely on for the next 5 to 10 years because it's turnkey. And these companies all have promo dollars, right? It's
Yeah.
vast amounts of promotional dollars. And so I'm not going to say it's an easy sell, but it's a sustainable sell. It's a win-win for everybody. And it's meaningful resources getting back into the youth organization that can have a great impact. And you
Yeah.
apply that obviously to other big box vendors because they have the same template, right? They've got other vendors who have got promo dollars, who want connectivity to the youth, and they want community connectivity. So it's a similar sell. Don't stop yourself at a grocery store. Look at you know Kohl's department store. Look at Best Buy, for example. All of those have the similar need and the similar program.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a great, really good angle to pitch, I guess, when you are talking to a big box retailer, or at least know that in the back of your head that there are those vendor programs and those promotion dollars that could be there
Yeah,
for your and you mentioned a few times nonprofit. Yes, a lot of youth sports organizations are nonprofit. Some aren't, right?
yeah.
And a lot of them aren't. And I don't know the breakdown of if it's 50-50, if it's 80, 80-20. Um, is it impossible or harder for a for-profit youth sports organization to get, or a club or a tournament or whatever it is, right? Facility to get dollars if they're a for-profit.
It's more scientific. Right, you got to be more scientific around for
Mhm.
profit because it's less mission aligned. I don't think that's fair, right? Because you're still serving the community in the same way that
Yeah.
a nonprofit would do. You just, I don't know that there's tax benefits either way. There are, but I don't think that sways one way or another. But there's a certain
Mm-hmm.
way that people view Pop Warner football or AYSO or Babe Ruth or Pony Sport, right? That people view them as sort of pivotal icons in the community recreational space. And so generally they're going to get the jump balls and the tip balls when it comes to resources because they look like they need support. They look like they need help. They are volunteer driven for the most part, and they are an authentic sort of community based program. And so, yeah, tip balls and things like that go to them. And perhaps you have to be less scientific and more mission aligned. When you're for profit, there's an expectation that there is a more significant return on investment. But I think it's the way you promote it, right? You're still doing the
Right.
exact same thing that are nonprofit. It's still important the journey of the child and the journey of the family and the sports, and you've got to win that over. But I think the key word is expectations would be higher of your
Okay.
scientific performance than it
Yeah.
would be as a nonprofit. Nonprofit sort of gets you out of jail card a little bit, right?
Right, right, right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that we didn't discuss today? I mean, that was amazing. Lots of little tidbits, and I'd recommend everyone go back and listen to this podcast twice because there's a lot of little nuggets, and we'll have details in the show notes. But is there something that I missed in this?
I
Yeah,
It's
go
the
ahead.
greatest story. It's the greatest story ever in the United States for sure because we place such a high principle on youth sports. I've
Yeah.
been part of the Aspen Play program, and one of the things that sort of I'm happy to see is the government back then, the Biden administration, were present at those meetings, understanding for the first time that the government could play a pivotal role in making sports much more accessible, not in response to equity companies coming in and franchising the business and then setting market tolerance rates to participate in
Right.
sports,
Yeah.
but not a bad reason to do it. And I'm not bemoaning the role that equity sports plays in youth sports today. One in every three kids today plays in a private organization. So but I think that there's evidence around just how healthy sports is mentally and physically, and so I
Absolutely.
think that was underscored from the pandemic, right? In which sports was as big of a healer in COVID once we got out of it than
Yeah.
any other thing that we did. Uh, and so I think that underscored the value of sports. It really helped rebalance the mental health and the physical health of children. So my guess is those in the Biden administration, or at least the long term people serving in government around physical health and wellness, really understood sports as an incredible ingredient. So I'm waiting for the government to really be involved. In Europe, for example, we have a thing called Sport England, Sport UK that invests vast amounts of money into youth sports education. We don't do that here in the United States. We're maybe one of the few countries in the world that don't, from a government perspective, invest in youth sports activities, which is really scary. And most of our sports programs are not school related, which
Right.
in Europe
Yeah.
and in South America, they are. So we depend on local organizations. And if you want to sing the praises of a Babe Ruth or a Pony Baseball or a Pop Warner, then yeah, I mean, massively iconic volunteer brands, and it's on the backs of people like you and others that have run those programs as a volunteer out of the goodness of your heart and the principles of your community involvement. And yeah, I've got to be honest with you, back in other countries, they're getting invested by the government. It's offsetting that. So tax dollars going to youth sports development, helping build facilities, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you're going to see the government play a more pivotal role. You probably need to grab a couple of guys from Aspen. Tom Ferry would be good to talk about what that potentially looks like. But I say we're on the cusp of that. But at the end of the day, the story of youth sports is one of the greatest stories to tell. And I think your podcast is going to help people maybe get clarity on how they sell it and how they devise the narrative, because there are lots of resources that people deserve to have to make their programs better, to give scholarships, to go back into schools and bring a friend for free to go play in the program, or increase the safety of the facility, or extend lighting so you can extend the practice day and training day to give more children more opportunity. So there's a ton of things that we need from a resource perspective to invest to grow the accessibility and in youth sports. It's a great story to tell.
Well, and the problem to date about, with sponsorships and stuff across youth sports, it is fragmented, right? There's little
Yeah,
groups in every city and town across the United States. So that's one of the issues. But if you look at the size of the audience, it's, more people are attending youth sports than, the NFL and all the major sporting events combined. It's just the
yeah.
numbers are off the charts, right? So it is a good investment. It is fragmented, but I think we'll see things, like you said, change over time. I'm hopeful of what you said, but still, like, do we need government involvement? Maybe from a funding standpoint, yes. From a overarching, we're very entrepreneurial here, right, in the United States, and the governing bodies, in Europe and such is, you can make an argument either way for, the good and the bad of that. Today,
Yeah,
the
I mean,
Trump
I'd
administration
look at
cutting funding, right,
yeah.
and supporting some very crucial programs in the United States. So, I don't know if we'll see the dream come true under the Trump administration. Yeah, not to get
Yeah.
political, but that's not the point of this. It's just, we're going through a change as a
I think
country.
here's a concept, right? I wouldn't want to see government involved in the operational side of youth sports. I want to see their investment into offset costs in a significant way. I'll give you an example of what that
Hmm.
can do. You look at U.S. women's soccer for a moment, and the dominance in which they have enjoyed years over years over years over years. In the
Yeah.
last 5 to 6 years, right, they have fallen from grace to a degree. In fact, you could make a case today that they may be, there was a time maybe a year ago, they might have been the seventh or eighth or ninth best team. So, question mark, how in the world would a country like England, that's 1/50th the size of the United States and 1/100th of the size of investment in girls soccer, all of a sudden beat the US national team? It seems incongruous that could happen. But it's investment, right? And so the England sport, UK sport invest in Great Britain soccer somewhere in the region of $100 million over the last 5 or 6 years. And so, more children are accessible to the sport, more training has been given, better facilities have been given, and all of a sudden the technical level of the English national team, and for France and Spain, if you want to add to that, are now better than the US national team. How is that possible? Well, US soccer gave their biggest grant in 1 year was $3 million. $3 million in a country the size of us, the national governing body,
Yeah.
that's their entire grant investment. And yet you've got a country the size of England that's putting in $100 million and
Wow.
more. And so let's not be foolish here and suggest that resources don't make a massive difference around where that investment goes. And so you've got a country in the US that the government doesn't invest any money in youth sports development at all. It doesn't have to be for the national team to do better, but it can be in us giving children, especially children in the city that can't get the access,
Right.
can't
Yeah.
be involved. I helped run an AYSO pilot program in downtown Atlanta, the Mercedes Benz. It was meant to be for 100 kids. 500 kids showed up, and
Wow.
every family member came with them. You could see the hunger and the thirst for this experience that they couldn't have. but it costs money to be able to run that
Right.
clinic. It was like
Yeah.
$10,000 to rent the place and get it accessible and some buses to help children get into it. So yeah, resources are super, super important. And when government can stop spending money on things that we know this is a waste of money and whatever that may be, but we know we waste incredible amounts of money, invest it in the children.
Yeah.
Because the payback is worth 10 times over. You could run all kinds of health statistics around obesity and so on and so forth that could save
That's
this
right.
country billions of dollars, right?
And
And
yeah, I heard
I,
just a scary thing today on another podcast talking about the young men are suffering right now as a whole, sitting in their basement doing video games,
yep,
and just other things because of, I mean, not I don't want to go into depth, but they're hurting right now, and you're absolutely right.
sure.
If we invest in sports and getting them involved like they once were, you're right. It can uplift the country because of the mental side, the physical side, right, and what that does short term and long term for a person. And we're not. This is not just an elite athlete, right? This is the everyday kind of player who enjoys going to play basketball that will never necessarily play at the higher level, right? It impacts every level of society.
Here's an interesting perspective. There's a disconnect in the youth sports that government funding could help, not to go back and beat this to death. But Dallas alone, right, is 1 in every 4 children is technically obese. And yet Dallas, I think, is the second highest rated sports watching city, metropolitan city. Where's the disconnect with so much support for youth sport for sports, right, engagement, and yet the physical health of that city is way above the average national average, and so you just wonder, you scratch your head and say, how's that feasible and how's that possible? And there's a disconnect between accessibility and ability to participate, and so that's, I think resources are required, right, to allow people, be that the Dallas or Fort Worth YMCA, to be able to provide stronger availability and accessibility. But it's resources to be able to cover those costs. But there's a real differentiation today around children's health and well-being, and you can see it through the obesity numbers, to our engagement in sport watching and the accessible to participate. And the more the equity companies get involved, again, I think to some degree it's a good thing. The cost is a big factor, right?
Yeah,
Because they're not
right.
going to run
Huge
programs
factor.
in which you
Right.
can't pay for it. And so
Yeah.
resources are required to fill that gap and allow children to participate, be they children in the city, be they children in the suburbs, be they children in rural areas. Every family needs a chance to be able to participate in youth sports. And in many cases, you're going to need to be some offset in costs. And I don't think it should be on the backs of somebody like you trying to volunteer to run things and then have to find ways to resource to bring children in that don't have the capabilities to participate, financially. This is where the government should support that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And Mark, this has been absolutely amazing, and the level of depth and knowledge that you have in youth sports is pretty impressive. You've obviously been involved for a very long time, and we appreciate you having
Sure.
you on the
Thank
show. And
you.
hopefully, we can have you back, and we'll keep on exploring this particular topic.
Yeah, I mean, if there's interest in that vendor program, it seems something you're interested too. But happy to help with anybody that wants to fine tune that process, or happy to help you with your listeners on raising funds. Like I said at the start, know enough to be dangerous, but love seeing people get resources to help them build a better program. So, and get more children capable of accessing the programs for sure. So
Well, where
whatever we
can
can
our
do to help.
listeners get a hold of you? What are
That's a
you
great
willing to
question.
share?
Yeah,
LinkedIn,
sure,
Twitter,
absolutely.
or wherever?
Yeah,
Yeah.
LinkedIn is good.
Okay.
So Mark Botterill, but M Botterill. So M and then my last name Botterill at Momentic. So it's Moment and Tech, just one T, Momentec, Momentec.com. If anybody's out there that's looking for help, I'm sure Momentic would be happy to support you. But if you're looking for advice on things that could help you build the program, and you're looking for corporate partners, and we can share what we think is in the marketplace. And if you're looking for help on tactical things, how to go to market, happy to spend our time and my time to help you with that. So all day long, happy to do that.
Mark, appreciate you. Thank you for
Pleasure.
thank you for doing what you're doing for youth, and appreciate you taking your time to share your experience with us today.
You got it, Bill. Take care of
All
yourself.
right,
See
take
you soon.
care. See you
Okay,
soon.
bye.